Tim Couturier, the Chief Innovation and Optimization Officer here at NextAfter, is going to walk us through a proven formula to optimize your email fundraising campaigns. Tim?
Well, thank you very much, Jeff, and everybody, thank you for gathering with us today here virtually. Before we get started, I want to follow up with an experiment that we've actually launched just prior to our conversation here today. You should have received an email from us leading up to today's webinar. And in that email was a screenshot of 3 different versions of the exact same email that was all designed by 3 different top agencies for Pier 1 Imports. And we asked a simple question, just by looking at each of these different emails, which one would you say is the most optimized? Which one represents what you believe to be the most effectively designed email that's designed to drive the most clicks and the most responses to the message? And we got quite a few people that responded to that request. And in fact, here's how the votes broke down. We had 19% of the people voted for email number 1, 27% of people voted for email number 2, and the winner, at least by popular vote, was email number 3, receiving 54% of the votes. Now, I know we can't actually discuss this over the phone because your lines are muted, but just think through, what are the things that you looked at in these emails to determine whether or not it was optimized? Was it, were you looking for an offer of some sort? Or were you looking for some sort of design element, a certain amount of white space? Perhaps one has this little squirrel thinking, a little thinking bubble. I mean, what are the things that we look for that leads us to understand and accept something to be optimized? What's interesting, and I've done this experiment many times before, is that we never seem to agree. Every single person on this phone is somebody that is, I'm assuming, involved in something related to email marketing, email fundraising. So all of us are involved in this process, and all of us have learned some certain best practices along the way. But the challenging thing for us when we start testing is that best practices may not be enough. So in a way, this is kind of a rigged experiment. I did not show you the control, but when tested against the control, each of these different emails that were all designed by top-ranking agencies in New York all underperformed. So if we want to go by, in terms of the least amount of decrease in click-through rate, I guess number 2 would be the best of the worst. So if you voted for 2, that was kind of like the best of the worst. 3 was the second best of the worst, if you will, and number 1 had a 52% drop in click-through rate. And the purpose of this is not to decide, who's right and who's wrong, but the idea here is to get us to start challenging our thinking about what it means to optimize our marketing messages. So precept number 1, the first main point that we want to talk about, the best practices are a wonderful starting point, but they're not enough. In today's rapidly moving environment, we need to figure out how we can actually use the web as a living laboratory and test different treatments in a live environment where we can allow our customers and our donors to help us better understand what is the best way to get our message across. And so I kind of went on a quest about 5 years ago, and I was looking to try to understand, how do I optimize the donation experience? How do I optimize the donation funnel? How do I optimize my marketing campaign so that I can actually help some of the organizations I have the privilege to work with to get better and better and better results? And this quest actually led me out of the nonprofit space and into the for-profit space. And I got connected with an organization based out of Jacksonville, Florida called MEC Labs, MECLABS. And MEC Labs is the largest marketing optimization institution in the world. And they work with some of the most prominent brands, many of which you would probably recognize today, and they are working with these groups to help them optimize their online marketing experience. And through the course of their research over the past 15 years, they have conducted over 1,500 major experiments. They've tested over 1 billion different emails. They've analyzed and tested 10,000 different conversion paths. They've made 5 million phone calls to key decision makers. And so they've done a lot of research. And out of their research, they have developed a certain meta theory. And I want to walk you through this meta theory because this is something that I got exposed to, and I started testing, and I'll show you really just some of the remarkable results that we saw from actually applying the same kind of methodology that's being used by some of the largest corporations on the planet, and how it can affect us as nonprofit organizations. So the theory kind of goes like this, and they start by talking about the funnel. And the funnel is something that I've thought a lot about. I mean, the donation funnel, ideally we want to move people from interest to involvement to investment. We want to use different marketing channels to kind of pour in the top, and the idea is that gravity kind of pulls people down towards the conversion goal that you have set for your marketing campaign. But one of the first challenges that MEC Labs has identified is that the funnel is helpful. It's a very useful analogy because all of marketing should be designed to move people to a decision point. But the problem is the way that the funnel actually is perceived distorts reality. People are not falling in the top. They're in fact falling out of the bottom. And so to get a proper perspective of the funnel and what's happening in our marketing, we need to take the funnel and flip it upside down. If we look at any of our conversion rates or response rates to campaigns, 1, 2, 3, 4%, it's easy to see how, yeah, of course, the majority of people are in fact falling out, not falling in. And the third observation is that when they are traveling through the funnel, they're not falling down the center. Gravity is not our friend. Gravity is our enemy that's pulling people out. People have a natural inclination to abandon the process. So instead of traveling down the center, what we find is that people are in fact actually climbing up the sides. And so there's a couple of key principles as this funnel analogy relates to our email marketing. And I want to get some of the theory out of the way so we can go very tactical and practical and look at some exact case studies that illustrate some of these key points here. The first key principle that we need to think about is that email is a relational medium. People do not buy from emails. People do not give to emails. They give to people. So we must conceptualize that the email is part of a sequence of conversation that contains a series of micro yeses that are leading people to a macro yes. So what do we mean by that? So if we look at our inverted funnel, and let's say that our ultimate goal, our macro yes, is to get somebody to give a donation to our organization. Well, in order to get somebody to achieve that ultimate goal, I need to have them negotiate a series of micro decisions. So for example, if I send somebody an email, they first must open my email, micro yes number 1. Then they must read the email, micro yes number 2. Then they must click on the email and maybe get to a landing page. And when they get to a landing page, they have to decipher the content and decide if they want to take the next step. And if they want to take the next step, perhaps they're taken to an online donation experience. And there's a series of micro yeses, a series of micro decisions that must be negotiated on their way to reaching the top of the mountain. Key point number 2. The essence of marketing is the message. We can't control the prospect, what they do, but we can control the message. And it is the message that attracts our prospects or prospective donors to the ultimate goal of giving a financial contribution to our organization. So in the context of this inverted funnel, we see that the force that propels people through these series of micro decisions that leads to the macro decision is the message. And the final point here is that the essence of the message is the value proposition. At each stage of the conversation, what we're trying to do is optimize the conversation in a way as to tip the scale from being a negative, which is cost-heavy, to a positive, which is value-heavy. And a simple way to kind of visualize this in your mind, this idea of the value proposition, is by looking at a fulcrum. And a fulcrum, on one side, we have the force of our value. So for example, the reasons why somebody would give. On the other side, we have the cost forces. So perhaps these are things like friction and anxiety and literally monetary costs associated with giving a donation to your organization. And so very simply, what we want to visualize and what we want to conceptualize is how we can actually make each of these micro yeses go from a cost-heavy value light to a value-heavy cost light. Let me do that again. At each of these series of micro yeses, what we're trying to do is to take it from a cost-heavy value light to a value-heavy cost light. And what's interesting thing to observe is it takes an unbroken chain of micro yeses in order to reach that macro yes, but it only takes one no to undo all of the previous yeses that we have won in our marketing. And so when it comes to testing messages and testing our value proposition, we actually have a formula that we can now follow. This is another tool, a heuristic formula that has been developed by MEC Labs and has been tested in the lab, and we've been testing it for the past 5 years with some of the nonprofit organizations that we serve. And very simply, this formula is designed to help us focus our thinking on the right elements to test in our email marketing. So let me translate this for you. Email marketing effectiveness equals relevance times offer plus incentive minus friction minus anxiety. On one side of the equation, we have value factors, relevance, offer, incentive. On the other side of the equation, we have inhibitors. These are negative factors, friction and anxiety. And every time we send a message, what we want to try to do is we want to pump up the value factors while at the same time reducing and mitigating some of the inhibitors that would stop somebody from taking an action. So let me show you what this looks like in practice. So I'm sitting there 5 years ago. I was in Miami, Florida, attending the MEC Labs Email Optimization Summit. And we're about an hour into the first session, and Dr. Flint McLaughlin, the founder and CEO of MEC Labs, he's going through all these formulas, and this kind of just piqued the inner geek inside of me. I just got really excited. I'm like, this sounds awesome. And I'm one of those guys that wants to try something out as soon as I get a new thing, when I get a new toy, right? So I remember the first break we had in the conference, I got on the phone and I called my team. I said, hey guys, get ready because we're going to change the way we do everything when I get back on Monday. I said, you know what? Forget Monday. Let's start right now. And we were just getting ready to send out an email prospecting campaign for the George W. Bush Presidential Center. We were renting email lists for the purpose of sending out appeals to acquire new donors for the organization. And I said, guys, give me like an hour to try and process what I'm learning at this conference here, and I will come up with a new treatment, a new design, a new concept that we can do a simple A/B split test and see if this stuff in fact actually works. So really my first research question was, does the MEC Labs methodology work for nonprofits? So I'm staring at this email message. The control version is on the left-hand side, and I'm staring at these formulas, and I kind of chickened out at the end of the day and really only made one tiny little change because I was afraid of breaking something. And that one tiny change I made, I don't know if you can spot it, at the very, very last sentence in the email, and we'll look at this case study in detail a little bit later in the presentation. But we sent out an A/B split test. 100,000 got the control, 100,000 got the treatment. And what we discovered is that one change led to a 139% increase in click-through, which translated directly to a 42% increase in revenue. And at that moment, I was totally sold. I said, I want to spend the rest of my life optimizing things. And so we did. We started testing this with other organizations. We found the same thing, that we could increase click-through dramatically, which increased the number of people that got to my website, which increased the number of people that saw my donation opportunities, it increased the number of people that responded with a financial contribution. And this, another example, again, we'll look at all of these in greater detail later. Simple little creative tests of just taking a Outlook-based email versus the control and HTML email. We saw some increases there. Or this changing the message, the content of the message. We found a 369% increase in click-through and 121% increase in revenue. And this kind of opens up to precept number 2 that we need to start thinking about, which is optimization is something that doesn't happen in the page. It's something that happens in the mind. What we need to think about is not how we can optimize our email campaigns, not how we can optimize our landing pages, but how do we optimize the thought sequences that lead people to have a conclusion occur in their mind that says, yes, giving to this organization is the right decision. And so there's an email messaging sequence that we're going to walk through. So this will make sense as we walk through each piece, but really what we want to create is a continuous, unbroken chain of expectations that starts from the time we get somebody to sign up and join our email file. And that continues on to the very first email that we send to them. And what happens in the message envelope, the to line, the from line, the subject line that inspires them to open, that carries through to the email messages itself, that inspires them to click, that carries all the way through to the landing page, that inspires and facilitates the specific action that we want them to take. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this email messaging effectiveness index, this formula, email marketing effectiveness equals relevance times offer plus incentive minus friction minus anxiety, and we will apply it to the email capture process, to the email message envelope, to the email message itself, and to the landing page. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about the email capture process. Again, if we think about this in terms of a fulcrum, there's two different strategies that we can think about when it comes to growing our email lists. And it all comes down to the specific offer we have associated with our email sign-up opportunity. So for example, on this fulcrum here, the prospect or the person that's visiting your website is always weighing these two factors. What is the value of what you're willing to give me in exchange for the value of something that I believe is of tremendous value to me, my personal contact information? And so what I want to do is I want to look at a couple different nonprofit organizations, and we're going to look at their websites, and I want to look at the different email sign-up opportunities that they have. And what we'll do together as a group is we'll score the email sign-up opportunities, score the value proposition using a simple tool that you can take back with your own organization and score your own email sign-up opportunity and see if there's some things you need to do to optimize that. So first one here, Salvation Army, very large nonprofit, one that most of us should be familiar with. Interesting enough, I spent about 15 minutes on this website and I could not find a single place on the website where I could actually give them my email address. So, step one, this is pretty basic, but have a way for people to give you their email information and permission to continue in a conversation via email. Here's another one, American Red Cross. They do, in fact, have an email sign-up opportunity. It's up at the top there. Join us, email, zip code, submit. We will look at that one, and we will look at this one for an organization you may not be familiar with. But there is an email sign-up opportunity here in the center, Become an Insider, and we'll look at that one. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to use this tool developed by MEC called the Email Value Proposition Assessment Tool. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the email sign-up offers and we're going to score the desirability of the offer. Is this something that to the ideal donor, in this case, this offer has no interest, possible interest, or high interest? We have to do some subjectivity, but that's okay. You'll get the point of this here. The other thing we're going to look at is the exclusivity of the offer. Is this something that the prospect can get anywhere else on the Internet, somewhere else on the Internet, or nowhere else on the Internet? So let's look at the first one here, American Red Cross. I'm going to kind of block off most of the websites so we focus on just the email sign-up opportunity. And based on what they're communicating to us about this email sign-up offer, join us, email, zip code, submit. How would we score the ideal prospect or the ideal donor's desirability level associated with this offer, just based on the context clues that they provide? Join us, email, zip code, submit. They don't tell me anything about what I'm going to get, and I have no way of understanding, why I should want to sign up for this. Aside from the fact that maybe I'm just a big fan of the American Red Cross and what they do, so that doesn't really help me on this in this exercise here. That's an assumption that we're going to have to kind of cast away. But just looking at the context clues, would you say that this is something that the ideal donor or prospect has no interest, possible interest, or high interest? Well, I know we can't vote here on the webinar, but having done this in many other contexts, usually the scores come in with a 0 or 1, and perhaps that's what you would have voted if you had the opportunity to do so. So let's go ahead and be generous and let's give it a 1. We'll say that perhaps there's possible interest to somebody that's really interested in the American Red Cross. Let's also score the exclusivity of the offer. Is this something that you believe you can find anywhere else on the Internet, somewhere else on the Internet, or nowhere else on the Internet? And just based on the contact clues, join us, email, zip code, submit. I'm probably going to get a newsletter. Now, I can get a newsletter probably just about anywhere. Maybe not for the Red Cross, but also, you know, we'd probably maybe score this one in the somewhere else or anywhere else category. So we'll give it a 0 or 1. We take those two integers, we multiply them together, and if the total is less than 2, we probably want to find a way to pump up the value associated with this email sign-up offer. So let's look at another example here, Cross-Examine. This is a broadcast outreach organization. Here in the center, we have the email sign-up offer, Become an Insider. Get instant free access to past episodes and extended teaching when you sign up to become a Cross-Examine Insider. And there's a click-through. When you click through, it says, when you become a Seed Insider, you will receive special behind-the-scenes footage of extended teaching and interviews, an insider's sneak peek, a virtual backstage pass, complete unlimited access to past episodes, a subscription to our content-packed weekly newsletter, and much, much more. So let's do the same, let's apply that same kind of scoring matrix to the ideal donor to this organization, or ideal prospect. Is this something that you believe they had no interest, possible interest, or high interest? Again, doing this in different contexts, usually most of the time this is between a 1 and a 2, so let's go ahead and give it a 1 or a 2, it really doesn't matter. And then same thing in terms of exclusivity. Based on what they're communicating about this email sign-up offer, is this something I can find anywhere else on the Internet, somewhere else on the Internet, or nowhere else on the Internet? Well, I think in this case it's pretty clear the exclusivity of this offer is very, very high. So I would say this is probably nowhere else on the Internet can you get behind the scenes and access to past episodes and all this other cool stuff. So we'll give that a 2. We multiply the two integers together. Even if the first one's a 1, 2 times 1 is 2, we probably have a more optimized email offer. And this is something that you can actually take and apply to your own organization. Go and look at your email sign-up offer and measure the desirability and exclusivity of that offer. And if the total is less than 2, you may want to think about ways where you can increase the value proposition of signing up to receive emails from your organization. Let's look at a case study. This is a adoption organization in Dallas, and what they have here is an email sign-up opportunity. They are offering people an opportunity to get access to all of these great resources about adoption if they register to gain access to it through their website here. And they send people from search engine marketing that are searching for things related to adoption, and they're also geo-targeted in Dallas. So, we've got a pretty interesting and relevant and appealing offer here. When they do register, they do get access to all these great resources. So we've got a pretty interesting offer. But we said, what can we do to look through this landing page and try and peer inside of the minds of the people that are coming to this website? How do we actually increase the relevance to that person? How do we increase the value proposition? And how do we also perhaps reduce some of the anxiety? There's kind of 3 aspects of this formula that we applied when we did this experiment. So version A is the control. Version B is the treatment. Now, if you look at the 2 pages, they're not radically different. In fact, version B is a much simpler design. Instead of a 2-column layout, we have a single-column layout. We've removed some of the conflicting calls to action on the web page. We've clarified the headline to communicate with just one specific customer or donor, in this case segment, for this organization. And we quantify specifically the value proposition of accessing this resource center. We even use process-level value proposition. So, for example, look at the button on the control. It says register now. Who wakes up in the morning and says, man, I can't wait to register for something? And we don't want to register. We want access, right? So we clarify the value proposition even in the button text. And the result, when we do a simple A-B split test, 42% increase in email registration for the optimized version. So we see one strategy that we can apply to optimizing our email sign-up offers is increasing the value associated with the offer. Another strategy is reducing the cost. If you think about it, if we look at our email capture forms, we have to ask ourselves, what is the cost for submitting an email to this form? Well, there's a couple of different things. It doesn't always have to be monetary cost. There's also mental costs associated with giving information to another organization. And there's also kind of a scale of intensity of costs, or at least perceived costs, depending on the kind of information you're asking for. So for example, we ask people to give their name. That maybe is on maybe the lower side of things compared to something like a social security number, which would be on the extreme high side of things. And then in between, we have different kind of levels. We have, email address is probably more towards the center. Phone number, well, why are they asking for my phone number? Are they going to call me at night? Am I going to be having dinner with my children and receive unwanted phone calls? So there's different levels of anxiety associated with giving contact information over the internet. And we have to keep this in mind when we're designing our email sign-up offers, or really any offer. So let's look at another case study here. Igonite is an organization that developed online giving, really cool technology actually. They have online giving technology that enables you to accept not just cash gifts, but also non-cash gifts like cars and trucks and boats and electronics. It's really cool. And they were doing this email sign-up offer on Facebook. And the control version of the form has first name, last name, email, organization, and phone number. And we said, well, what would happen if we just reduced some of the anxiety, some of the friction involved with signing up to receive this ebook and remove the phone number? Which is, there's really no reason to ask for that. It's pretty clear that we're trying to get their phone number so we can call them and talk to them about our giving technology. So let's take that out of the equation and see how it affects the number of new names that sign up for this offer. So we set up a simple A/B split test. Version A is the control. It has the phone number with it. Version B is the treatment. It does not have the phone number. And that one tiny little change produced a 51% increase in registrations for this offer. So we see that the number of different pieces of data we ask for can add friction and anxiety into the process and actually slow people down, and even worse, have them abandon the process altogether. So when we think about creating our email capture forms, not this, we don't want to create a form that looks like this, but this, something that just asks for the essential pieces of information. Something that looks like, not like this, where we're asking for tons of pieces of data, but something as simple as this. We're just asking for the essential pieces of data, and we get perhaps the answers to the other questions in a downstream or secondary contact point. Not this, but this. What's interesting, if you look at these two different email capture forms, or these two information capture forms, really, if you look at them closely, there's no difference in the amount of information that's collected in the one on the left versus the one on the right. However, we got to keep in mind that friction and anxiety are things that exist in the mind, not on the page. And the perception is because the one on the left is all laid out in a vertical fashion, it's perceived that it's actually asking for more information than the one on the right. So, moving on. Optimizing email opens and click-through. So once we have people signing up to receive emails from us, what do we need to do to inspire them to open and inspire them to click? So applying the same formula, email marketing effectiveness equals relevance times offer plus incentive minus friction minus anxiety to the email message envelope to inspire more opens. What are the things, what are the different elements that we can test? We can test the to line, the from line, and the subject line. Doing something very simply like personalizing the to line with the person's first name and last name can increase response rate as much as 10% or more. But that goes back to the email capture process. If we're not collecting the person's name, we cannot personalize the to line of our message. So we see how there's linkage between each of these different things. The from line, is this email going to come from a person? Is it going to come from the organization? Is it going to come from the person, comma, organization? These are different things that we can and should test. Subject line, this is the biggest area where most organizations test. And actually, we probably in a future session will do an entire workshop just on email subject line testing. But for the purposes of today, I want to focus a little bit more on the email click side. This is an area where I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit for most organizations, and it's an area that not a lot of people talk about. So let's look at our email and the different things that we should be focusing on when it comes to optimizing our email message to inspire more people to click through to our landing page and respond to our offer. Well, the first thing we have to get clarity around is what is the goal of our email? And the goal for every email needs to be the same. The goal of the email is not to sell a donation. The goal of the email is to sell a click. Because if you think about it, people cannot donate through the email. They have to get to your website in order to complete a donation. So sometimes we actually give people too much information where they say thanks but no thanks, whereas we should just give them enough information that inspires the click and allow the landing page to do the job of inspiring the gift. Different little things to test, internal subject lines. If you do a personalized email that looks more like a message coming from a person rather than coming from an email machine, a headline may look out of place. And a simple way to insert a headline is by having an internal subject line. Very interesting. The first 80 characters of your email message is an interesting place to test as well, because this little preview text tends to show up in most email clients. So for example, if you use Google Gmail, it'll say who the sender name is, the subject line, and then it'll also show the first line or so of text. So this is a very critical area where you can be testing, communicating value and the reasons why somebody should open and in fact click on the message. Personalization, again, depending on whether this is a personalized email, personalization is a very powerful way to create that connection. Headline. Why would we use a headline? The goal of the headline is to arrest attention and to get people to read those first 2 inches. The first 2 inches needs to convey and communicate the value proposition. Why should I pay attention to this message? What's so important, and why should I, move my way through this message? I mean, you got to think about it. When people are in their inbox, they're on kind of a search and destroy mission, right? People are not looking for a reason to click; they're looking for a reason to delete. So we need to convey a value proposition as quickly and effectively as possible. Call to action. This is a great place to start testing. What specifically do you want people to do? And more importantly, why should they in fact do it? Why should they click through to the landing page? Why should they click through to read the story? What's so compelling about your story? Why now? Why now? Why is now the important time to take action? Testimonials are great to use in emails, especially if you're trying to amplify a point. If you want to establish credibility, have somebody else do that credibility for you. And then relevance. Interesting. Relevance is a multiplier in our email messages. I want to talk briefly about relevance. And there's 2 types of relevance that show up in our email messaging. There's internal relevance, which is applied through segmentation, and then there's external relevance, which is applied across segments. Internal relevance are things that we know about the people that are on our file, personal interests, demographics, personality, communication style, their level of engagement, where they're at in the donor life cycle. These are all different things that you can use to segment your messages and send very specific, targeted messages to people depending on what you know about them. External relevance are things that happen in the world, right? So seasonality, things that are happening on the calendar. Special events, things that are happening, current events, in the news, limited time offers, holidays, even things as trivial sounding as weather can be ways to create external relevance in your messages. And by point of illustration, a few years back in February, I live in Dallas, Texas here, and we typically don't get a lot of cold weather. But February 1st, 2011, I won't forget it because it was Super Bowl week, and I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my home team, Pittsburgh Steelers, were in town for the Super Bowl, and this is what it looked like outside. Everything was like a completely iced-over mess. And so I remember, work was shut down for an entire week because our snow removal process here in Dallas is just basically wait for the sun to come out and have it melt. So I'm sitting there in my home office. I'm watching my kids make snow angels out in the front yard, and I'm sitting there kind of working away, and I got this email. And the email starts off like this: "Hey Tim, did you make it into work today? I did after an icy 2-hour commute. If you didn't, I bet work is just piling up. And that's where Creative Circle comes in. We've got the talent to help you catch up. Worried about the weather tomorrow? No problem. Our guys can work remote, so it doesn't matter. We can get the job done." So this is a kind of a talent placement agency. And I thought it was really clever how this gentleman here used something as trivial seeming as weather to create a relevant conversation with me about my staffing needs. So really kind of interesting, and you can see how external factors can be a powerful way to create a strong mental conversation with somebody that you're trying to inspire, either to take some sort of action or give a gift. So I'm sitting there in my home office, I'm working away, and I get this other email. And the first thing I see, it says cool off, and there's a swimming pool, and there's this like big misting fan thing, and it says summer's right around the corner. And I'm like, really? And the next thing I see is beat the heat and save and all patio mitts. So I'm like, what? And it says in this issue, quick links, register now for what exactly? In fact, how did I even get on your list? That's a good reminder for me to opt out, hit the spam button about 5 or 6 times just for good measure. News? No, I get that from TV. Thank you. More about us. Well, you know what? It must be all about you. Sales must be drooping because it's freezing outside. And so you figured you just send out an email, and I'm just sitting around waiting for something to spend my money on, and a Mr. Fan is good as that. I mean, do you see what happens when we actually don't think about our prospects or donors as human beings, when we just think of them as targets that we're firing bullets at? They're not targets, they're people, right? And so this is one way to create a very lousy brand impression, but also to inspire people to not respond to future offers because they think that you think that they are a schlub, right? So when it comes to creating relevance, keep in mind ways that you can actually use external relevance to amplify a conversation. So let's go back and look at some of these different email appeals that we looked at earlier, and I want to break down some of the different specific things that we tested and what we learned, more importantly, from these tests. So let's look at the George W. Bush Presidential Center test here first. So I mentioned we only changed one sentence. If you can spot it, it's the very last sentence of the email. Now, if I read my best practice guides, they say only 18% of people read to the end of an email message. So how could making one tiny change, especially to the last email or last sentence in the email, how could that make a material difference? What we found is 139% increase in click-through and 42% increase in revenue. So here's the change we made. The original call to action, the original final sentence of the email read like this: "Please accept this invitation to stand with President Mrs. Bush by making a tax-deductible online contribution now." Well, sounds like a typical ask we might make in an email. The optimized version read like this: "Please accept this invitation to become a charter member of the George W. Bush Presidential Center." So what conveys a stronger value proposition? Making a tax-deductible online contribution now, or becoming a charter member of the prestigious George W. Bush Presidential Center. Well, the cool thing is I don't have to guess anymore. As a marketer, as a fundraiser, I can use the web as a living laboratory, and I can allow my donors to tell me how to better communicate to them, and I can continue to evolve my understanding of my donor by continuing to test and test and test. Let's look at another one. This one was a creative test. We said, I wonder what would happen if we just made the email look like it came from the head of the organization. What if we created like an Outlook version of the email as opposed to this email on the right, which was our long-standing control, which has the HTML wrapper and it has the little signature at the bottom. Which one will get the most clicks? Well, we set up our A/B split test. Interesting enough, the message, by the way, is exactly the same. Same content, same call to action, same language in both messages. The click-through rate was actually identical. So that we found that kind of interesting. I mean, it was statistically not differentiated, not by much at all. And so what was interesting, though, is when we looked at the people that got version A, they were much, much more motivated to take action than the people that got version B. The people that got version A gave 118% greater, had a 118% greater donation conversion rate and had a 50% higher rate of advocacy action that they took. And we started thinking about, well, why? Why is this? And it's because the perception of this coming directly from the person, from the the CEO of the organization, actually carried with it so much more weight that people were much more motivated to take action once they got to the landing page. Let's look at this other test. This is the first in a series of several end-of-year emails, part of an end-of-year email campaign for the Heritage Foundation. Version A was the control that had the typical end-of-year language, which was give gift now, donate today, that kind of language. And we said, well, what if we focus the email not on trying to get people to donate, but just getting people to the landing page and allowing the landing page to inspire people to donate. So we did a simple, just creative test. We changed the language of the message. We changed the call to action. We said, click here to watch this video that was on the landing page. Now, we have the exact same landing page for both the control and the treatment. But by focusing on the selling the click as opposed to selling the donation, we experienced a 369% increase in click-through, which produced a 121% increase in revenue from this email. And that was a very powerful learning, and it actually was a powerful lift as well. And we're able to take those learnings and pay them forward in all of the future emails that we use in this end-of-year campaign. It was one of the most successful end-of-year campaigns of all time. So let's keep moving. I've got one more experiment we want to look at here. This is a email appeal for the Chuck Colson Center. The typical emails that they would send are very long form emails. They're all written, by Chuck Colson before he passed away. And so, we'd send out this long email, and we'd have a very, short form landing page. So they'd click through, and the landing page is just all about, giving their donation, completing their transaction. We said, well, what if we just, take some of the learning from these other experiments, and we focus not on trying to sell them on getting a donation in the email, but we sell them on just clicking through to the landing page and allow the landing page to do the job of the selling, to give a gift. And so we set up our A/B split test. And by the way, they get the same amount of content whether they go through version A or version B. So version A is long form email, short form landing page. Version B, short form email, long form landing page. So we set up our A/B split test. Version B had a 1,209% increase in click-through rate, like pretty dramatic. I mean, very dramatic, in fact. 1,200% increase in click-through rate. But when we looked at our donations, we found that this short form email actually had a negative increase in donations. We actually saw a drop, a 3.5% drop. So we looked at our data set. We said, do we have a significant difference? Well, on the click-through rate, yes, most certainly 1,200% with significant difference. We tried to validate this decrease in donations. We realized that we had not reached statistical validity. We did not have a large enough sample, so we needed to test again. So we tested the same thing the next month. And that's an important thing to think about. You need to continually validate these tests that you do and make sure they pass a statistical validation so that you're not making decisions on incomplete data. So next month, similar kind of experiment. Version A, long form email, short form landing page. Version B, short form email, long form landing page. And this time, we still saw an increase, a 117% increase in click-through rate with the short form email. But this time, we grew donations by negative 30%. All right? So a couple very key learnings that came away from this experiment. And the first one is, very simply, is that the learning is often more valuable than the lift we can experience. So what was the main learning we took away from this experience here? Well, if you look very carefully at both of these emails, you see that they're signed by Chuck Colson. The web page is signed by nobody. It's just a web page, right? So what we concluded from this experiment is that the people that response for this organization are very, very driven by what the founder actually instructs them to do. And the more that he explains to them why he wants them to do that, even though we don't get as many people to read through the email and respond, they're much, much, much more motivated to take action. So we were able to take this learning and apply it to future campaigns, and we were able to have breakthroughs in our marketing because we had a very deep understanding about our audience and what they cared most about. One of the other interesting things we took away from this thing is that best practices are not enough. We started to discover some new best practices, or what we thought were new best practices, which is focusing on the click, not focusing on selling the donation. What we realized is that every organization is different. We have to continually test our best practices and validate what makes the most sense for our audience. And the other thing that's interesting too is that we have to make sure that we're validating the right metrics. If we were just focusing on click-through rate, we would have stopped after the first test because we had a 1,200% increase in click-through rate, and we would have missed the fact that we were actually shrinking the number of donations we're getting through on the back end. So I know a lot of email management systems report on open rates and click-through rates, and that's great. But if we're not tracking that all the way through the process, we may be making false assumptions based on how our marketing is doing. Okay? Okay, so I lied. One more email experiment. This email was an email experiment we did with the Heritage Foundation. In this case, it was just a simple test. We were focusing just on this call to action box that shows up in all the emails, the control. It says renew your Heritage Foundation membership for 2012. The treatment, we said just in this one box, let's communicate what happened, what their membership accomplished in the previous year, and then ask them to renew their membership. So you can see them side by side. The control just tells them what we want them to do. The treatment says here's what you should do and here's why you should do it. And what we found with this is that we had a 20% increase in click-through rate. But what's more interesting we found is that this one little change actually also influenced the average gift. We found that people that responded to the treatment had a 14-15% higher average gift, which is kind of an interesting finding and led us to believe that when we communicate a value proposition with such tremendous force, not only do we get more people to say yes, but they say heck yes, and they give at a much, much higher level. So let's keep moving because we're running short on time here. So we've talked about how we can optimize some strategies to optimizing our email sign-up process to get more people to sign up to grow our email list, something we should be constantly focused on. We talked about ways where we can optimize the email message envelope and the email message itself to inspire more opens and more clicks. Now let's talk about the landing page. And the first thing we need to talk about is how we measure success. And the main thing we need to think about is conversion rate, which is the total number of goal completions, or in this case, donations, divided by the total number of unique visits. This is a measure of the effectiveness of the complete thought sequence from beginning to end. The average for nonprofits usually hovers between 2 and 3%. So NPO average about 2.72% of the people that come to the website actually in fact make a donation. So what are some of the things we need to think about when it comes to optimizing our landing page? Well, we need to focus on the offer, the value proposition that is offered in exchange for a donation. We can focus on introducing incentives. So these are appealing elements that we introduce on the landing page that inspire people to kind of tip the scale in your favor so that they take the desired action. But one of the biggest low-hanging areas of fruit that we have found is this idea of eradicating friction that exists on our landing pages. And friction is anything that causes psychological resistance to a given element in the giving process. And so probably the best way to explain friction is to allow you to experience it. So here's what giving should not feel like. So I'm going to pick on my friends from World Vision. This is from a campaign several years ago. So to my knowledge, this same kind of website is not in use today. But let's look at this webpage and keep in mind that the purpose of this website is to get donations. It is a fundraising campaign. So if I came to the website with an intention of giving a gift, I've been inspired, I want to give, where would I click? There's a lot of different images and buttons and links on this page here, but if I wanted to give a gift, it's pretty clear, upper right-hand corner, there's a big donate button. So I click on donate. Then it takes me to this page. Now I start to get a little bit concerned because I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do next. My eye is immediately drawn to the main area of content on the website. The first link that I encounter says where your donations go, which is helpful, but that's not what I want to do. I want to donate. Search for a student group. What does that mean? Looking for your page, click here. To create a page, click here. To create your own fundraising page, click here. There's some buttons. Sign up now for what exactly? Ask your question. 1-800-7-FAMINE. Okay, 1-800-7-FAMINE. How do I donate? Or get more info. Or donate on Facebook or Twitter. I mean, there's all these different things I can do, but I click donate, right? So I would expect that I would be able to donate, right? Well, believe it or not, down here in the bottom left-hand corner, if I click enough times, and if I find this little Easter egg here, discover more ways to help, that is in fact where I need to click to donate. And when I click on that, it takes me to this page. I have, at least something that aligns with my intention. I see a donate now button. Now, I don't know if I would have made it this far. I don't know if most people make it this far. But let's say I did, and I click on the donate button. Now it takes me to a different website. I have this moment of reorientation. Where am I at? What am I trying to do? How do I do it? Like, okay, I have $30 and I hit donate now. And then it puts it in a shopping cart, which I think is kind of strange because I don't want to purchase a child. I just want to sponsor one. But I'm like, okay, I'll check out. And then I check out, and then it says, now you need to create an account. So I fill some information. I hit continue. I fill out some more information. I hit continue. I fill out some more information. I hit continue. I fill out more information. And this is kind of like the experience that I'm left with. If we think about this, unfortunately, we do this to our donors every day. We make it more difficult than it needs to be for them to complete the action that we ultimately want them to complete. So what we need to think about is how do we actually take an experience that feels like that? It has all these different steps. It's very convoluted. It uses inside baseball and a lot of different kind of links and buttons and text that leads me in places that I don't really necessarily want to go. And how do we create something that contrasts that experience with something like this? On the same page that inspires the donation, I have a contextualized opportunity to respond with a financial contribution. Or this, after taking some sort of advocacy action, I can actually respond with a financial gift that kind of puts my money where my mouth is. So I've just taken an advocacy action. Now I'm going to support and back up what I just did with a financial gift. Or this, on the same page that communicates the value of becoming a member and talks about how my membership is going to have impact, I can respond with a financial contribution. Or this, in the context of a timely, goal-specific, end-of-year campaign, I can respond to this media-rich message, this video that's just played, by responding with a financial gift on the same page that inspired my gift. So let's look at a couple different optimization experiments where we really kind of focus on each of these different aspects of this formula. So version A, in this case, is for a donation landing page, and this one, again, I believe it's for Heritage Foundation. We have a donation opportunity kind of up near the bottom here. And very simply, we said, how do we compress the value proposition so we don't have to use as much copy to say it? We can say it in less real estate just by shrinking some of the friction, some of the scrolling friction that takes place. We can actually achieve 138% increase in donor conversion. Or this, on a page that communicates, how I can become a member. In this particular example, we said, well, how do we get people to understand the value of their membership? So version A is the control. It very simply just says, here's the different levels you can join. We said, well, maybe we need to communicate why they should join. And so we actually increase the amount of text that they have to go through to understand what membership's all about. And in this case, we experienced 147% increase in donor conversion. Here's another example. In this case, this is a membership sign-up page. Version A has all the different membership levels and the different benefits associated with it. It has a little comparison chart so you can kind of see the difference between these different levels. Version B, we said, well, maybe that stuff's not important. What people really want to do is just respond with a gift that aligns with a level they feel comfortable with. So in this case, we stripped out all of the the value content, and we found a 67% increase in donor conversion. And this kind of leads us really to the last point. I know we're just about out of time here. But testing trumps marketing intuition. So at the beginning, we kind of looked at these different versions of an email, and we had to kind of make a gut reaction, a decision about which one we felt was the most optimized. But the neat thing about testing is it opens up an opportunity for us to create a living laboratory where we no longer have to guess, but we can actually test different hypotheses, different treatments, different ideas, and allow our donors to communicate to us based on how they respond. So here's a couple, just a good way to close here. A couple best practices that we tested, and we found just some interesting results. First best practice, donation form always needs to be above the fold. We've talked about this for years, right? Above the fold, above the fold, above the fold. Everything important needs to be above the fold. We said, well, maybe that's not the case. Version A, we have the donation experience above the fold. We have a 2-column layout. Version B, in this case, we say, well, what if the page needs to follow a sequence of thoughts that need to lead them to make a donation? Maybe the best place to put the donation form is at the end of the page. So version B has a lot of text that communicates why they should give, and there's a form at the end of the page. When we set up our A/B split test, we found that version B had a 74% increase in donor conversion rate, 189% increase in average gift, and a 274% increase in revenue. So what we learned from this is that actually this best practice may not be in fact true. The best place may not be above the fold for your donation opportunity. Maybe you need to put it in the right sequence of thoughts that leads to the place where someone would logically respond with a gift. Here's another one. Nobody reads text. We don't need text. We just need pretty pictures, right? So this was a kind of a best practice that, and perhaps a design philosophy that many designers like to employ. And we said, well, but on this page, if you look at version A, there's just a really beautiful picture of Senator Cornyn and an opportunity to respond with a gift, but it doesn't really communicate any value. So we said, well, let's put some copy there that communicates a value proposition. Why should I give to Senator John Cornyn? Why should I give to this campaign? And just by making that one tiny little change and doing an A/B split test, 258% increase in donor conversion. So the people do in fact read text. They do read the copy, and it's the people that are the readers that are probably the ones you need to be most concerned about. Here's another one. Pretty is better than ugly. So version A was a long-standing control we had been using because we found that this long-form landing page works with the donation form at the end and the copy that explains why they should give a gift at the top. But we started to see that other organizations had these very, beautifully designed pages that had the hero shot, and they had their copy in 2 columns laid out on the side. And so we did an A/B split test. Version A was the control, version B was the treatment. We found that this pretty looking design actually decreased our conversion rate by 75%. Also dropped the average gift by 3%. So in this case, we found that actually ugly is in fact better than pretty. And this last one is kind of an interesting one. This is one that I've been taught throughout my direct response career, is that when you have multiple conflicting calls to action on the same landing page, you dilute your response rate to both calls to action. We said, well, let's test that and see if there is, in fact, an instance which makes sense to have multiple different calls to action if you align them properly. So version A and version B are exactly the same. In version A, we have a donation form on one side, we have copy on the other. Version B is exactly the same, but down here in the bottom right-hand corner, we have a secondary call to action, which is an email sign-up opportunity. And we said, well, if we give people an opportunity to sign up for emails and get this resource, we need to give them a confirmation page. And on that confirmation page, why don't we make another ask? So we have version A, which is a 1-step, 1 call to action. Version B is a 2-step, 2 call to action. So we set up our A/B split test. Version A had a 2.52% donation conversion rate. Version B, a 2.51% donation conversion rate. So statistically, exactly the same conversion rate. However, we also had a 5% name acquisition sign-up rate with that secondary call to action. And when we passed those people through that confirmation page where we made another ask, we had a 14.16% donation conversion rate on that page, which created an effective 25% increase in donor conversion. And so what we see, what I'm hoping comes clear, is that testing trumps marketing intuition, but ultimately adequacy is the enemy of excellence. This is the one thing I'd like for you to take away from this, that a 10% conversion rate is a 90% non-conversion rate. And I'm hoping that just seeing this opportunity to test and to optimize inspires you to never be satisfied, to constantly test and test and test, and find new ways of inspiring your donors and actually evolving your understanding of what they really truly care about so that you can communicate with them more effectively and raise more resources to help your organizations continue to grow and create impact. So summarizing 3 key points, I know we're over time. Best practices are not enough. They're a great starting place, but I would suggest that we need to develop a testing methodology that is based on science, not based just on design rules. We don't need rule-based optimization. We need specifically science-based optimization. And I would submit to you that the MEC-Labs methodology is one worth investigating. Point 2, optimization is not something that happens on the page. It happens in the mind. If we focus too intently on optimizing the emails or optimizing our landing pages, we may miss the point. We have to look through the screen to try to see the person on the other side of the screen and think through what are the thought sequences that lead people to the conclusion that they should give, not just give, but give generously to your organization. And finally, I know this sounds like I'm beating a drum here, but testing trumps best practices. Testing trumps marketing intuition. The best way that we can get a learning is by testing. And when we get these learnings, we can compile those learnings to get a tremendous breakthrough and a lift in our responses to our different appeals. So final point, when you test, you may in fact fail. And I would encourage you to get acquainted with failure because it is part of the process. But when you fail forward. I have learned so much more from the times that I've been wrong than any of the times that I was actually right. So understand that failing is okay. It's part of the process. And when you test different things, you will fail. Hopefully not as bad as the guy who invented DVD Rewinder. And so I think with that, we are out of time. I'm very thankful for everybody who attended the webinar and who stayed a little bit longer than anticipated. I know it was a lot of content, but I hope that you found value in it. And I know that Jeff is going to come back on the line and give some final instructions, but we're very, very thankful for you. A couple of points here. Please feel free to email me with any questions you have. If we're not able to get to them on the call here today, I'd love to get those questions from you. So my email address is here. Feel free to send me an email. Also, if you have any feedback, we're constantly trying to optimize our presentations and make them more effective and useful to you. So if you have any feedback or constructive criticism, please send that to me as well. Also, if you have any ideas of things that you'd like to see covered in one of these future web meetings, I'd love to hear from you in that respect as well. So, go ahead, Jeff. I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, we've got a couple questions, Tim, some folks wanted to answer. First of all, before we get to the questions, I know there were some folks who had issues with audio. Maybe if you're having issues with audio, you can't actually hear me right now. But if you had issues with audio, we will send out the full video and slide deck after the session, probably later this afternoon. But we had a couple questions for you, Tim. Number one, how can you increase donor motivation? Is it possible to affect that? You said that one of the biggest factors was driving motivated donors. How do you actually get your donors to be more motivated?
That's a great question. MEC-Labs has another heuristic, and they talk about the most important factor that determines conversion is visitor motivation. It's also the thing we have the least amount of control over. So some of the ways that you can affect visitor motivation is by looking at some of the upstream channels of communication. So for example, if I'm sending people to the website from an email, and the email is setting a kind of a thought sequence, or we're setting a expectation, then we can actually influence motivation to some extent. Also, if we use offline sources of communication like radio or television, we can actually influence the motivation of the visitor to our website by actually presenting some sort of offer or setting some sort of expectation in that upstream vehicle of communication. But since that's something we don't have a lot of control over, which is the visitor motivation piece. What I would encourage you to focus on is the things that we do have control over, right? Which is the experience that people get to when they come to the page. So I have to have them jump through a series of hoops. There's a lot of friction in my giving process that I can reduce by making it easier for people to respond. Is there something I can do to communicate a stronger value proposition? What is the copy that I put on my page that tells people why they should give and why it's urgent and how their gifts will be used and how it's going to create impact? So I wouldn't focus too much on the things that we have the least amount of control over. I'd focus first on the things that we have the most control over.
There's actually a follow-up question to that. Would you say that finding more qualified prospects is a way to increase motivation?
Certainly, and that goes back to the whole idea of looking at your upstream sources of communication. So, for example, if you're renting different email lists, or if you're renting different direct mail, this goes for any channel, really. The quality of the list, we all know this, the quality of the list is going to determine, a large fact what your conversion rate is. So, we can see a lot of that impacted by the sources of traffic. Great question.
One other question. How do you decide who gets which version of the test emails?
Yeah. So and most email systems are set up to do this, where you can set up a A/B split test, and every other person randomly selected will get version A or version B, and they'll be able you'll be able to generate equal samples in both your control and your treatment. Same thing on landing pages. There's many different pieces of technology that exist today that will actually split your traffic, so every other visitor is going to get a version A or version B or version C, depending on how many treatments you launch. One free one I will mention is Google Analytics. Built into Google Analytics is Google Experiments, which is a tab under, I think it's behavior or content, but it enables you to set up simple A/B split tests for free if you have Google Analytics installed, and then it will split your traffic for you and even validate your tests.
Cool. One other specific question. Were they successful heritage email tests to house file or prospect lists?
Yeah. We've tested both. The ones that I showed today actually included both. So the end-of-year campaigns, we send those out to everybody on the house file, but we also send those out to folks that are prospects as well. So both.
Good to know. I think that's all of the questions we have.
Okay. Yeah, one other point, too, that I'll make in closing, and everybody, thank you for sticking around for questions. We apologize for going over our time. But one more thing, if you are interested in a research partnership with us, as Jeff mentioned, we do have some openings becoming available. And if this is something that you're interested in and you'd like to do some testing to grow your email lists or to perform better email appeals and get better response rates on your landing pages, feel free to reach out to me or to Jeff or to somebody, and we'll be happy to talk to you more about that. So we thank you for everyone who's attended today, and we look forward to seeing you on a future web meeting. So have a wonderful day, everybody, and remember, keep optimizing.